Chess friends, I hope you are doing well. Today, I am going to illustrate a brilliant chess gambit named the Halloween Gambit that I played against the Sophia chess engine. She is the top chess engine with a performance rating of over 4000 Elo. I will also illustrate Halloween Gambit tricks and traps because Halloween is coming, so stay tuned until the end of the video. Let's get started without wasting any time. I began the game with e4, after e5 knight f3 knight c3 and we have knight to f6. In this 4 knights symmetrical variation, what would you consider? Bishop here, bishop e5, castling and all the other boring stuff. From black's perspective, he will play the boring stuff as well, but let me disguise myself as a ghost, go to my neighbor's house, and shock him with my appearance for Halloween. I sacrifice my knight on the e5 square. This is called the Halloween Gambit because after the capture, you can play d4, creating 2 strong central pawns. Here black has 2 options to consider, knight c6 or knight g6. Of course, knight to g4 is not possible because you can push your pawn to e5, creating pressure on the knight. And the knight on g4 will be hanging, therefore, many chess players might consider knight to c6, but this is a completely bad move because you can now push your pawns forward. Your 2 pawns are just advancing into your enemy's territory, laying landmines in their camp. As the knight moves, you can play d6 and eventually put your knight on the b5 square, threatening to take on c7, which would be devastating for black because after exchanges, knight to c7 is unstoppable. Even if they move their queen, I wouldn't rush to play knight to c7 early in the game. Instead, make positional improvements. If you find a good move, always look for a better one. You can place your bishop on c4, holding the threat of knight to c7. If black tries to protect the rook, you can castle. If the knight moves to h6, you can consider h4 immediately. This h4 move is crucial because after a6, you can play your powerful move. Black tries to kick out the knight, but you can disguise yourself as a monster and hide in a dustbin, ready to shock them during Halloween with knight to c7 check. You attack the king, and as the king moves, you can play bishop to g5, trapping the queen. The game would be over at that point. Returning to our knight c6 discovery, after knight c6, you can play d5. We discovered the variation with knight to e7. Let's see what happens if black dares to play knight to e5. That's another alternative variation. Here, you can play f4, kicking the knight out again, and eventually play e5. You'll notice that 90% of your pieces are still at home, unemployed. You can bring your queen to e2, gaining access to the half-open file. Black might respond with bishop to b4, putting pressure on the knight, but remember the key idea in the Halloween Gambit, you must maintain a strong pawn structure. That is your strength in this gambit. You can push another pawn forward, kicking the knight, which becomes vulnerable. Black might try some exchanges on c3, but after the trades, the knight retreats. Another reasonable move for black would be knight to e7, which is prophylactic because it attacks your pawns. Then you can quickly bring your queen to h5, pinning the pawn. Black might think, hey, it's a free pawn, I'll take it, but the problem for black is that their pieces are undeveloped. It takes them too many moves to develop. Even the bishop needs moves, and the king needs to castle to secure itself. Now, you can shock black by tying a firecracker to their leg and setting it off with bishop to g5. Black would be shocked because f6 isn't possible, it's pinned. After the knight moves, bishop to d3 comes in, gaining access to the file. Black has 2 major options, d6 or knight takes c3. I'm sure no master would play knight takes c3, but if your 200 rated opponent does, you can castle. And a few moves later, your rook will control the open file, making e6 or f7 vulnerable. That's your plan. You might argue that the moves I'm showing might not happen in your actual game, and yes, the game might be different, but you need to understand the key moves and ideas that apply universally across variations. The rook and bishop will attack the knight on e7, the pawn is pinned, and this is your major idea. After the queen checks, and the king moves, you can consider f6 to attack black's pieces. If black plays knight to g6, you can capture it and later play queen to h6. Followed by bishop to f6 and queen to g7, which would be unstoppable. The game would be over for black. They would be finished, You could also prank your sister by putting a plastic snake in her room, she'd be terrified. But it's just for fun. Going back to the reason behind avoiding knight takes c3, it's a bad choice. That's why many master level players would prefer d6, attacking the center. You can push your pawn because black's f7 pawn is pinned to the king. After g6, the queen comes in. Some players might consider c6 to bring the queen out, but white can play queen to g7, attacking the f7 pawn. After the rook moves, you have the powerful sneaky idea of bishop to h6, attacking the rook. The king will be vulnerable with no escape. The king doesn't move like a knight or a monkey, so it will be trapped. So, let me share an inspirational quote in sudden with you. There are people who come as lessons and people who come as blessings. Both are necessary for your growth and evolution, so be thankful for both. Returning to our game with Sophia, when she noticed d4 was coming, she didn't play knight to c6, instead, she played knight to g6, another variation your opponent might consider. Then you can play e5, kicking the knight, and later bishop to c4, gaining access to the open file. Queen to f3 can also arrive. Black has three major options, d5, d6, or c6. These are the top engine lines. If black plays d6, you can place your queen on f3, which is what happened in our game. Bishop to e6 is, of course, not possible because of queen takes b7. Therefore, Sophia thought for a bit and considered queen to d7. Her main idea was to play queen f5 to exchange queens. I simply castled, and that's what happened in our actual game. We have rook to e1, gaining access to the half-open file where e takes d6 could happen. Your king needs safety, so I immediately considered knight to d5. You may observe that in every move, I am trying to attack black. I am trying to develop with tempo, with knight takes c7 as a threat, and positioning black so he can't develop his pieces or get his king to safety. That's my plan. Even if you dare to consider rook to c8 to protect the pawn, it doesn't matter because after the bishop moves, I can capture the bishop on e7, the queen and rook file will be wide open. Do you know the tactic I would consider in this position? It's bishop takes d6, attacking the king and queen simultaneously. A 69 IQ player might think of protecting the queen and then get checkmated by queen takes e7, the game would be over. So, going back to the position, we discovered that playing rook to c8 is not possible. Therefore, after castling long and putting the king in a safe position while protecting the pawn, we have queen to c3, attacking the pawn on c7. As the bishop moves, the knight retreats, and here I considered bishop to a6, attacking the pawn. Of course, pawn takes bishop is not possible because your bishop is hanging, and the king will lose the safety provided by its pawns. As the king moves, we have d5 to attack the bishop. Here, many players might consider bishop to d7, trying to protect the bishop because it's under attack, but chess is not so simple. You attack a piece, and your opponent tries to protect it, and vice versa. No, there are tactics behind it. I can sacrifice my bishop on b7, and after you capture, I can play knight to c4. What's the plan? The plan is to attack the queen. After queen to g4, gaining access to this rank. Since I can't play queen to b4 check after the knight moves, what's my plan? My plan is to kick out the queen with f3 and rook to e4. Go, queen, you have no place here. As soon as the queen moves to h5, you can play a check. When the king moves somewhere, though it can't go to c8, there will be a checkmate. After the king moves to a8, you can play queen takes c7, attacking b7. Later on, you can place your bishop on c3, showing your real power, because queen takes a7 will lead to a checkmate. The game would be over for Sophia, and you can give her some candy to stop her crying. So, going back to the position, we discovered that playing bishop to d7 would be a very bad choice. That's why we have queen to e5. After capturing a4, you can see that exchanging queens would be a very bad choice for black. After the exchange, the rook would control the open file, giving me a slight edge. That's why after queen to b3, and a few moves later, we played c4 in the game. Queen capturing c4 happened, and still, you cannot capture my queen because, after the exchange, the rook file would be wide open. That would lead to a winning advantage for me because there's a pawn on c6, which holds a great positional advantage for me. The pawn is like a solid piece, almost like a bishop, holding 3 points of value. If the pawn weren't there, I might lose the game because I'm down material. A few moves later, you can see that queen to g4 came onto the board. Here I played another brilliant move. Remember, simply learning chess gambits and openings won't ensure that you defeat your opponent. You must also learn chess tactics and strategies, as I demonstrate in my videos. Here I played a chess tactic. Can you guess what I played in this position? Think a little. I played rook takes e5, brilliantly sacrificing the rook. You can't capture it because your queen is hanging. After queen takes queen, you might think I would exchange queens and continue the game. No. Fool, I am the boss of every chess engine and grandmaster. Let me capture the pawn on a5, giving another life to the black queen. It's a queen sacrifice, as my knight, pawn and rook are all joining forces to attack the black king. That's what I want in this game. I sacrificed my pieces like Mikhail Tal. Attacking black with all my forces. By the way, I made a video about playing against Mikhail Tal on my other channel, so you can watch that after this. As the king moves, we have a check, and knight to a6 follows in the game, attacking the pawn on c7, leading to a potential checkmate. After the rook moves, we have bishop to c3. Now, I'm threatening rook to a7, which could lead to a checkmate. The game would be over, and your dumb bishop isn't located on c5 to protect that diagonal. That's what happens in your game. Your pawns are just vulnerable. I mean, your pawn structure is vulnerable, so you have to sacrifice the queen. A few moves later, we did some rook exchanges, and at the end of the day, it's knight bishop versus 2 rooks. With 1 rook left, this position is winning for me because all I need to do is push the pawn. I captured the kingside completely. Later on, we exchanged rooks, and I had 3 pawns left. In an open chess position like this, it's completely winning for me. I promoted to a new queen and eventually checkmated her. I hope you enjoyed the game and my Halloween gambit as well. If you want more gambits or different gambits, comment below. Also, like and subscribe to my channel for more videos. Wishing you all the best. Bye bye, take care and see you soon.